Hello, I'm Jaden Huehl, and I'm sitting down with a very special guest today. She is the Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today and a best-selling author, Susan Page. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Jaden, I'm so pleased to be with you. Thank you.
So you are here in Lawrence to receive the William Allen White National Citation. What does this award mean to you?
It means a lot. I'm so delighted. I was thrilled when my friend Jerry Seib, a KU alum, an alum of this journalism school, told me that I'd been chosen for this award because, of course, William Allen White, a legendary figure, at KU, a place that's been very much a part of my family's past, and so it was. I'm just delighted.
And you were chosen for this award because of your amazing and outstanding work in the journalism field. And I can't wait to start, that conversation. But let's go back way to the beginning. What originally got you interested in journalism?
I started working on the mimeographed newspaper at Robinson Junior High School in Wichita. It's now middle school. It was at junior high school then. And it was just so much fun. Journalism is so much fun. It's a public service. It's an important thing to do. But it's also gives you the license to go out and see big events, to interview interesting people, to try to tell their stories to a larger audience. And so I was kind of hooked. Then I worked, on my Southeast High School newspaper, the Stampede, and the yearbook, Hoofbeats. And when I was graduating from high school, after I thought about music school, I thought about other things. In the end, the only thing I really wanted to do was journalism, and that's what I've done since then.
And you're originally from Wichita, which is only a stone's throw away from El Dorado, which is where William Allen White is from. Did you have any connection to him throughout your childhood or during your journalism career?
So I had no personal connection with him, although El Dorado is where my dad grew up. But by the time my father was born, William Allen White was already editing, it was in Emporia editing the Gazette. But I grew up with William Allen White's legacy in journalism and in politics. William Allen White was a big figure in journalism, but he also was a force in American politics at a time of incredible tumult. He stood up against the KKK. He took brave positions. Presidents came and talked to him. So he was really a legendary figure and an example of the difference that a small-town newspaper editor can make, not just in his community, but really in the whole country.
You chose to pursue your undergraduate degree at Northwestern. Why did you choose Northwestern instead of staying in-state like much of your family had? And I heard actually earlier this morning that when you went out of state, that was your first time leaving Kansas. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. So clearly just my bad judgment not to come to KU. But I applied to Northwestern. I got into Northwestern. And when my folks took me to Chicago to move into my freshman dorm, it was the first time I had been outside the state, which sounds extraordinary, doesn't it? I mean, it didn't seem extraordinary to me at the moment, but it was really, considering that, since then I've worked in, done reporting in dozens of countries in 6 continents, done a lot of travel for the work I do. To start from a base that was really so constrained, it's just, maybe it made me more interested in seeing what was going on in other places. But yeah, and I think it's an example of what college can do for kids. So you grew up on a farm.
Yes.
And I imagine that KU has been a kind of launch pad for you into other worlds, because Northwestern was certainly a launch pad for me into other worlds and into the life I've had since then.
Can you talk a little bit about your college career? Was there anything that stood out to you or anything that made a big difference in your career or your life that happened?
So the main thing I did at Northwestern was work on the Daily Northwestern, the 5-day-a-week newspaper that students published. And mostly I tried to get through my classes. I was not a devoted, if I went to college now, I'd pay a lot more attention than I paid then, because the Daily Northwestern was like my community. The minute I walked into that newsroom, I knew this was where I belonged. I think there are people who do other kinds of work who feel that way. There are people who walk into a hospital and think, I am meant to be a doctor or a nurse, or people who walk into a classroom and think, I was born to be a teacher. And that is how I've always felt about newsrooms, even when I was doing a lot of traveling to new and strange places and needed to walk into a newsroom in some foreign country or in some other city, even if I didn't know a single person there, I always felt like, yeah, this is my place, this newsroom. There's, I think, no greater gift you can get in the career that you pursue than feeling like this is exactly what I was meant to do, and I cannot imagine doing anything else.
We spoke briefly about William Allen White and his legacy and how that connected to your story. Was there any other journalist that really inspired you?
You know, there's this whole group of women journalists who did extraordinary things and never got credit for it. And I was seeing at the Kansas State Journalism Hall of Fame that you have here, some women early war correspondents that I had never. I'm embarrassed as Patty Huehl was one of them. Embarrassed to say I've never heard of. Marguerite Higgins, who was a groundbreaking woman war correspondent, I think was quite the remarkable figure. So there are lots of inspirational journalists, and some of them are men, but I've been really struck by the role of women in journalism that has not always been acknowledged. I'll mention one other editor I had. My first editor, my first full-time professional job was at Newsday, the newspaper in New York, and my first editor was Bob Greene, who was this legendary investigative reporter and a huge character. And the 2 years or so I worked directly for him made a big difference in my life too.
If you could go back and talk to your younger self, was there any advice that you wish you would have had, or even just information about the career that you were going to have?
So it's one lesson I've followed that I learned, and I think is so important to keep in mind, is get out of the chair and out of the office and to cover the event. You can't cover things by text or email or even telephone, not in the way you can cover things when you're on the scene. That is the value of having a journalist cover something, that they're there to see with their own eyes, independently, in a trustworthy way, what is going on or what people are saying or what you learn in an interview. So I worry sometimes that we do too much journalism sitting in the office on our phones when we really need to be out of the office and into the street. I know, well, like one of the early stories I did for Newsday, so I'm just starting out, and they sent me to do a story about some event at a school for the deaf. Like it was I don't know, I forget what the event was. It was a very standard feature kind of thing I was assigned to do. And I get there, and at this school for the deaf on Long Island, all the kids were about the same age. And although it was a school that went through like kindergarten to high school, and I said, well, why are the kids all about the same age? And they said, well, because there was a measles epidemic, and it cost all these kids their hearing at the same time, and so there's this huge bulge in the deaf population, and will always be like those kids are now, well into adulthood. But that bulge in the deaf population has continued and has had huge ramifications for deaf education, for their place in the community. And that's not something I ever would have noticed if I hadn't been there. It was so much better than the story I was sent there to cover. And that is a lesson that I've carried.
We spoke briefly right before this about, how there are so many women in journalism who were not given credit, and so many women working in journalism that, you weren't aware of, and that I'm sure there are many that I'm not aware of. Did you feel like you faced any hurdles as a woman in journalism, especially at that time being one of the few, especially once you did get to, national reporting?
So I've had the kind of plow ahead theory of life. So I've just always plowed ahead, and people face different kind of challenges people of color do, people who are disabled, people who come from very low income families. People face hurdles. I'm sure there were hurdles on being female, and occasionally I've been the first woman to do something. But I gotta say, I've never kind of paid attention to it because it didn't seem useful. And because I've always loved what I'm doing, So there was never a time when I thought, oh, I wish I could do something else if I weren't female. I've never felt that way. And I do think whatever the hurdles have been historically, that there's more of a level playing field now than there used to be.
You've covered presidential campaigns, White House administrations. You've talked to a lot of really important people. Is there one story that really stands out from your career that you would like to share today?
So I have had this privilege of interviewing, 10 presidents, which is a lot. We've only had, 45 of them. So 10 is a lot of presidents, 3 of them after they left office, 7 while they were in the White House. And that's been great, and they've been interesting. But I gotta say, the interview that was the most fun and meaningful for me was in 2000 I interviewed Stephen Hawking, the nuclear physicist, who is almost completely disabled, was in a wheelchair. At that point, you would ask him a question and he would use his thumb to pick words or letters off a computer screen, and then a mechanical voice, an artificial voice, would say whatever it was he had picked out as his answer. So you'd think that would be a terrible interview, right? And it was a fantastic interview. It was so interesting. He had this life force that I don't know quite how to describe. He made a joke at the end of the interview. It took me 2 days to figure out what the joke was because it was so clever. And it was a fantastic experience. And when you think about it, I went to Southeast High School. I didn't leave Kansas till I was out of high school. I never took a real science course. And I interviewed 10 presidents and Stephen Hawking, and tell me what career I could have followed that would have allowed me to do that.
So this brings me to my next question, which is, you've talked to so many powerful people and important people with titles. What is something that you don't think people realize about those conversations?
It's the more interviewed someone is, the more practiced they are, and the more likely they are to just tell you whatever they answered the last time. And the goal of an interview is to get something new. The goal of news is to get something new. It's like the first 3 letters of news is new. So you want something that people don't know or understand. You want people to be spontaneous so that they actually reveal themselves. And that is the highest goal of an interview. So, for instance, I did a biography of Nancy Pelosi, the only woman Speaker of the House. And she is a very practiced interview. So she is a tough interview to get something spontaneous about. And I discovered in interviewing her doing this book that she was at her best in terms of being real if she was really mad. So the interviews I did with her, I did one after she had just come from a very contentious meeting with AOC and the squad. And she was steaming. And so I said, well, what happened at this meeting? And she started talking about the squad not being realistic or politically sophisticated. And so it was a wonderful interview in which she actually displayed her resentment and her caustic view of these colleagues in the House of Representatives. And that's a lesson, because you want an interview to do something that hasn't been done before, either in having someone reveal themselves or ideally giving you some news that no one knew before.
So you mentioned that you have written a book over Nancy Pelosi, but you're a best-selling author over many different categories. You're writing a book right now, which is actually supposed to come out next week. Is that correct?
That's right.
It's The Queen and Her Presidents.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what it is to be an author, about that process, and also this new book coming out?
Yeah, thanks so much for asking about it, because I'm at this moment where I'm most concerned no one will buy my book. So, because it's finished, but it's not for sale yet. I'd done daily journalism for so long, and I love daily journalism. I've never left daily journalism. I still do daily journalism. But writing a book is like exercising a new set of muscles. It's like similar skills, but different. The time you do research is so much longer. The need for to have narrative thread through a book is more, because you need people to get interested in the book and keep reading it, right? A book is an investment of someone's time. So that's been great, and I've learned a lot. The first book I did was a biography of Barbara Bush called The Matriarch, and in that book I I wrote the book, and then I had to rewrite the book because I had made it like a string of newspaper articles, which is not what you want to do with a book. This latest book is a little different. It's about Queen Elizabeth II and her relationships with a string of U.S. presidents. So it's not really a biography exactly. It's more like a particular slice of history. And so that was a little different, and so also kind of fun to do. And it was fun to interview. So I interviewed for this book, I interviewed 4 presidents and 3 prime ministers and 3 first ladies, and got some insights, I think, into the impact that Queen Elizabeth had that people didn't always see. You know, you remember her as this figure on a balcony in a colorful hat doing that odd little royal wave, that easy to mock royal wave. But she was, in fact, a very shrewd politician and diplomat, and she had a sense of humor. And there were times in history where her intervention helped her country in significant ways, and sometimes helped the United States as well.
Is there a particular piece of that book or something that you found in your research that you found really, really interesting that you could share with us?
So I interviewed President Trump for the book. He loves the Queen. Some of the interviews are hard to get. President Trump agreed right away to do the interview. And when he was invited to a state dinner in London at Buckingham Palace in 2019, so he's seated next to the Queen for these hours, and he said, I really pressed her on this question, who was your favorite president? Now, I'm sure every president wondered who was her favorite president, but I bet no president but Trump dared ask her who was her favorite president, and she wouldn't answer. Everybody was wonderful, which is in fact not what she thought. I couldn't possibly choose one or the other. And Trump said that after the dinner was over later, he was told that she did have a favorite president, and it was him.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I'm very excited for your new book, and I definitely want to read it. But going a little bit back to your journalism career, how has your approach to journalism evolved throughout the years?
Well, journalism in some ways, journalism has changed so much. The way our timetable has changed. Now, there are no deadlines. Every minute is a deadline. That wasn't true when I got started in the business. The lines between different kinds of journalism, like magazine, newspaper, radio, TV, that's all been blurred. We all need all those skills in this new journalism world. The technology is different. The platforms are very different. It's not like the 3 networks no longer have a stranglehold on what people can see, what video people can see. You can go on YouTube and see almost any video of anything. They don't need print outlets like USA Today to reach, politicians don't, to reach their constituents. So your role is slightly different. But when I think about it now, after these decades doing it, in a way it hasn't changed at all. In a way, the mission of journalism has not changed at all. And what you try to do as a journalist, or what I try to do as a journalist, is exactly the same as when I got started, which is to look at important events, or interview significant people, or take a look at people's lives and what's happening with them, and tell that story in a meaningful way to other people. And so even if we file in different ways, or people get our content in different ways, the fundamental of journalism is exactly the same.
And you're known as a very credible journalist, and credibility is a huge part of this career. Can you speak to that?
So it's all we have. People don't, especially now, people don't know what to trust. There's so much disinformation. There are AI-generated things that mislead people. So our credibility, our reputation, both personally and for the outlets we work for, is this precious, precious resource. And I think that you protect that by doing everything you can to be accurate, to be fair, to see things in shades of black and white, to see things in shades of gray, not in shades of black and white. And when you make a mistake, because we all make mistakes, to be transparent about how you made it, to correct it, and to not make it again.
There's a lot of students here at the University of Kansas, especially here at the William Allen White School of Journalism and Mass Communications, who are looking to enter a career in this field. Do you have any advice for them?
It's such a great time to be going into journalism. And some people don't think that because there's been so much turmoil in the industry, but I actually think the skills that young journalists bring are important. Young journalists tend to be much more comfortable with dealing with some of the new technology than more senior journalists do. There's all this experimentation going on about how to pay for the journalism we want to do. So you have nonprofits like ProPublica doing important work. You have these hyper-local sites that really serve communities in an important way. So I actually think it requires a certain bravery. It's not like going to work for an insurance company. It requires a certain daring, but the payoff is so great, and I actually think this is a wonderful time to be going into journalism, and I'm so glad that young people are still interested in being journalists, because there is no better life in the world.
What would you say to a student who is unsure about going into a journalism career?
I think if you don't really want to be a journalist, it's too much trouble. I mean, it is hard. It's hard to get your first job. We're still figuring out how to. The business model for journalism is changing. You take a lot of grief from politicians and others. So if you like journalism, but you also love playing the trombone, you might think about which you're going to be happy with over the long term, because journalism is a great life, but it's not always an easy life. And particularly getting the hardest thing is getting the first job. Because once you got your first job, you can prove what you can do and get your second job.
What changes to journalism do you anticipate for the next 5-10 years?
You know, when I started, I could not have imagined the technological changes we've seen. And so it's hard for me to imagine what happens ahead. And of course, our biggest challenge at the moment is AI. What role is AI going to play in journalism? There's no stopping it. It's going to be part of our lives as journalists. And so that's, I think, the current thing we're trying to figure out. How do you use AI in a way to take away some of the junk work of journalism, but leave the key work of journalism to humans? Because AI cannot do what humans can do in covering the news, but AI can do something, and it can make journalism more affordable. It can improve coverage of local places, and that's what we're now trying to figure out.
After everything that you've accomplished in your career, is there anything that still excites you about journalism?
Everything still excites me about journalism. Like if I've got a big interview coming up, I'll try to think hard about what to ask. I was talking to Frank Sesno, who's a former Washington bureau chief of CNN, who now teaches at GW. He has an interview coming up with Nancy Pelosi for a program that he does. And so he and I were chatting about how do you get Nancy Pelosi to be, to give you a fresh interview, not just talking points. And he had this great idea, which I'm now going to steal, which was he's going to start the interview. I'm sure Frank won't mind me telling you this, by saying, Speaker Pelosi, I'm going to give you one word and you give me one word, what this word association, I'm going to say a word and you give me in one word what your response is. So he's going to say, I suggested he say Marjorie Taylor Greene and get a one-word response. But that is a great way to start an interview with someone who you want to get a little bit off their game so that they are more spontaneous. So I'm still, after all these years, excited about finding new ways to interview people. So do you get nervous before you do an interview?
Oh yeah. I mean, I definitely still do. I will say, we talked right before this about my show, and I do interviews about once a week, if not more. So, but yeah, every time there is that little bit of moment of just of nerves. And I think that makes it better though, because it puts me a little bit more on edge, you know what I mean? And it makes you be more acutely aware of what that person is saying about your surroundings, if you can pick up on anything else.
And if you're bored, there's no way your audience is going to be interested, right?
So we've talked a lot about journalism. Is there anything outside of journalism that really brings you joy right now?
Oh, yeah. So I have 2 kids and 2 grandchildren, and they bring me, and a husband, let's not forget him, also a journalist. So they bring me a lot of joy. I'm active in my church. I love to read. I especially like cheap murder mysteries.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, who doesn't, right? I mean, I love music. I live near the Kennedy Center, so I go over to concerts often. Sadly, it's going to be closed for 2 years. But there is so much that brings me joy. And journalism has always been part of that.
What was it like to be married to a journalist?
Yeah. So it's like the only person who can understand why you are constantly canceling dinner. And I remember once my dad was coming to visit us in Washington, and my father was a pretty serious, imposing person, possibly hard to talk to. So my husband was being very diplomatic about him coming to see us. And then we invaded Grenada, which I had to stay and cover. So I canceled on dinner and left my husband with my father to make conversation all evening, which was like, I'm sure, a scarring experience. But only another journalist would understand why I could not possibly say, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot cover the war in Grenada because my father's coming to dinner.
Was there anyone who was in your family who was a journalist?
My brother, Max Page, was a journalist, and was a little older than I am, and so he was part of getting me interested in high school in journalism, and he actually attended the William Allen White School of Journalism, and he graduated, to the surprise of some members of my family, from the William Allen White School of Journalism in KU, which was good. And he worked in television journalism. He worked for WFAA in Dallas and WXIA in Atlanta, and then he worked for the Gannett Company, which I work for now. He worked for it before that. And then he helped create the museum. So he had a long journalism career. And sadly, he's passed away now. But this was always a bond between us. He's the sibling I get along with best because we understood each other so well.
Were there many people from your high school that ended up doing journalism past, just the high school mark and going into college and then continuing into a career?
Not that I know of. I mean, maybe, but not the little group that I graduated with. There's no one I know of.
Is there anything else about you that people should know or you would want them to know that we haven't covered in this interview?
Well, I just feel, a life of such good fortune. And to do, it doesn't have to be journalism, to do something you love to do, it is a privilege.
Thank you. Well, students and community members will also get to hear more from you at the William Allen White Day event. But for now, those are all of the questions that I have. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was wonderful to be able to sit down and talk to you and learn about your life. And thank you all for watching. I'm Jaden Huehl.